Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show, a roughly 1 hour, unscripted, interactive, conversational Bible study between a group of genuine misfits transformed by God's amazing grace. My name is Zach Adams. I am a Christ follower, a husband of one. I outplan my coverage. Jessica is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, second to Jesus. I'd like to wish her early happy birthday. I am a father of three, Quincy, Theodore, and Mabel. I am the luckiest guy in the world because I get to pastor, I think, the greatest church around, Calvary 316. We're not a large church, but we are a very cool place, a genuine group of believers, transparent, family, such a cool place. If you're interested in learning more about the church, just visit calvary316.com. Again, calvary316.com. Tonight, I'm joined in studio, as always, by the man that needs no introduction, the maestro behind the madness, the producer of this dysfunction, my partner in crime. He goes by many names. This time of year, it's Scrooge McDuck, because he hates Christmas. With his mustache, he's Dick Dastardly. He goes by his God-given name as well, Creighton Vaughn. Creighton, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Hello. I'm really leaning toward Scrooge McDuck. I like that a lot.
You like that nickname?
I do. I want to get basically the same shirt that you're wearing, but with Scrooge McDuck instead of Trump.
Okay, for those that don't know what shirt, so if you're listening on the podcast, so here I'm going to actually stand up so people watching the live stream can see this shirt.
Make Christmas great again.
Yeah, it is a a couple of years ago I went to a Christmas party and it was one of those like ugly sweater contests, and I bought this. And I think I bought it for like $15, and I made 100. So this sweater has yielded wonderful returns. I don't wear it anywhere else, but knowing that tonight was going to be a Christmas episode, I thought I'd break it out. So if you're watching on the podcast, it is a really terrible Christmas green, and it says "Make Christmas Great Again" with a picture of Donald Trump, President Trump,
wearing a Santa hat.
So anyway, I appreciate that. Also joined in studio tonight, the Three Amigos. We've got, to my working right to left, we've got Mr. Nicholas Monty, who really has no nickname, but that's Nick Monty right there, rocking the Outlaw Radio shirt.
One day.
Say what?
I said one day, maybe one will come.
Maybe one day you'll get a nickname.
Yeah.
We've got, he really needs no introduction. That is the ugliest, what is it, reindeer hat?
Vixen, probably. I don't know which one.
Rudolph.
It's not Rudolph.
It's a Prancer or Vixen.
Deal Daddy Derek, also known as Derek Kennedy. Derek, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Hello.
How you doing, man? How's your week going?
It's all right, man. I'm excited for Christmas.
You're excited for Christmas? This will be a fun Christmas for you, man. First, I mean, with Kelly.
First Christmas married, so that'll be awesome. Man,
it's great in your home. You've been decorating.
You just bought a new door.
Oh, it looked like Christmas threw up in our house, and I love it.
And you love it. That's great. That's great. I heard, I hate to bring this up, but I heard you locked yourself and your wife out of your house.
No comment.
No comment. All right, we'll move right along to Spice Daddy, also known as Justin Honeycomb. Justin, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. This is my favorite time of year. I guess it comes with the fact that I'm a fat white guy with a beard, but you know.
That's true.
You are very jolly.
It also, it's because it's Christmas, and it's a wonderful time of the year. I love your hat. Can you very quickly, again, for those listening on the podcast, you have to describe it, but for those that might be watching, can you explain what that hat is?
It's basically get a good angle.
It's an Arabic symbol.
Arabic, basically the Arab letter in. Noon. And it stands for Nazrani or Nazarene, which is what they call Christians. So,
in fact, during again, this would be a few years. I'm sure they're still doing it, but when ISIS was really prevalent, and they were ravaging, kind of from Syria through Iraq, they were targeting Christians, and they would spray paint, the Arabic in as a symbol of like, hey, these people need to be targeted, and yet Christians have kind of adopted that as a badge of honor. Solidarity, kind of like the Ichthus was maybe in the first century.
Right. And the term Christian as a whole. Didn't it mean little Christ? They called us that as a
derogatory term in Antioch, the little Christ. And it's like, okay, what a compliment.
Yeah.
I'm acting like Jesus. Yeah. That was the goal.
I think it's funny that it stands for, basically means a Nazarene, which has always been kind of an insult or a bad thing to be called by. But
That's true. That's very true. So if you are new to the show, the way that this show operates, the way it works is it is a conversation. That's why these guys are here, and they're free to interject at any point. It is designed to be interactive. Again, if you're listening on the podcast, this might not be as relevant for you. But if you are watching the live stream, again, Wednesday nights at 8 p.m., we live stream the show. The comments section on both Facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw or our YouTube channel, which is outlawradio.live. From both locations, there's a comments section below the video feed. And from there, you can type in comments, feedback, ask questions. Creighton is monitoring those pages. And if what you're sharing is edifying and the gatekeeper decides it should be added onto the show, we can interact kind of in real time, which is also a really fun component of doing the show the way that we're doing it. And finally, what makes, I think, Outlaw Radio unique is that the show is unscripted. So I don't know what we're talking about tonight. The fellas in the room don't know what we're talking about tonight. The only one that knows is Scrooge McDuck over there, whose job it is not only to produce the live stream and whatnot, is to come up with a topic of discussion. It's my role to turn it into a Bible study that's edifying and interesting, and these guys help me with it. So with all that being said, Creighton, let's dive into the deep end of the swimming pool.
Okay, so first off, I would like to say if you're watching on the live stream, if you're listening to the podcast, and you have small children around, now would be the time to remove
we get a
them.
disclaimer. We're getting a disclaimer.
Yes, you will want to remove them. This is a serious topic. I don't want to be the first to broach this subject with your kids. This is the kind of conversation that a responsible adult will have with their kids at some point.
This has to mean we're talking about Santa Claus.
Song of
It
Solomon.
is.
Song of Solomon.
Chapter 1, verse 1.
No. Yes. The question is Santa Claus. And we can take that in a couple of ways because in this room we have a father of three, two prospective fathers, whether they realize it or not.
They're practicing. They're practicing. It
two
can happen.
people who at some point may have the opportunity to possibly at one time have a child.
Possibly procreate.
Right.
We have one procreator and four potentials.
Well, yeah.
Four potential procreators.
So the question is, like in a broad sense, should Christians do Santa Claus? Is doing Santa Claus a moral choice? And if it is a moral choice, is lying to your kids about Santa Claus a sin?
Man, okay, you gotta like
Touched all of them.
all right, I gotta go through these, lay out the questions one at a time again. You kind of just threw them all out there.
Okay.
One at a time, slowly. Speak slowly so we know exactly what we're going to try to talk about.
The first question is, and they're kind of all wrapped up in one, which is why I dropped them all. But the first question is, should Christians do Santa Claus or should they not do Santa Claus? As in, should the whole mythos about there being a real man that lives at North Pole, should they or should they not do Santa Claus? Is it actually a moral choice? And if it is a moral choice, is lying to your kids about Santa Claus a sin? And I feel very strongly about all three of those things.
All right,
Hence the nickname Scrooge McDuck.
Okay, before I even attempt to get into this particular topic, I say get into this particular topic before I attempt to tiptoe my way through a minefield.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Thank you for that, Scrooge McDuck. Let me kind of throw it to you guys.
Oh, yeah.
How did your families, and again, we're not answering the question yet. We're just kind of talking from personal experience. I'll begin. Growing up, my family, my mom and dad, I was the oldest. I have three younger siblings. We did not do Santa Claus at all. It wasn't part of our Christmas tradition. It wasn't part. Of course, it's hard to live in America and be completely detached from the mythology of Santa Claus. He's kind of, and I'll get to that in a minute. So, like my grandparents who were big into Santa Claus, they would give us presents. I remember as a kid, and one or two would be from Santa Claus. And we knew Santa Claus wasn't real, so we had fun with that. It wasn't a big deal. My grandparents enjoyed it, and we kind of played along, etc. And then at school, when you had friends that you get this speech from your parents at some point where it was like, hey, not everyone shares our position about Santa Claus. This is not your job to spoil it for your friends that might believe in Santa Claus, which, was really a check on my personality.
Right.
So we didn't do Santa Claus. There was none of that. My wife absolutely did. Growing up, I mean, there were like, she lived in Iowa, so there was like snow for Christmas, and so there were like Rudolph prints, and they went all out with Santa Claus. I will say for before I even get to my family, guys, what was so I had no context, no experience with Santa Claus.
I had, my parents made me believe that there was a Santa growing up. So they did the whole Santa Claus thing where Santa came and, put the gifts out and everything. And so I was the middle child. And what was weird about it is my sister's 10 years younger than me. So at 15 years old, 12 years old, or however old I was, I knew she was only 2 or 3. So they still tried to do it with her. And I had to go on and
you had to play along.
I had to play along and be part of that. So growing up until I was out of the house, at 19, 18, 19 years old, I had to play along with it because she was only 8 or 9 at that time and still, I think, believed.
So you were like diehard Santa Claus. Like you woke up looking for Santa Claus.
Yeah, we put the cookies out. We did all that stuff.
And they were like eaten and half the glass was drank.
Yeah, but I was a terrible child and I found out real early because I would snoop downstairs and see my dad setting up all the presents and be like, oh, look, it's from Santa. I'm like, yeah, you set those up.
So that's how you weren't told.
No, I found out.
You Sherlock Holmes that joke.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
How old were you when it was like, this is nonsense?
I think I was like 8 or 9.
8 or 9?
Yeah.
8 or 9 years old. So you were like 3rd grade, 4th grade.
Yeah, probably. I remember what house I was in, but I'm trying to get the age group I was in the house.
What was your reaction to it? I mean, were you upset with your parents? Did you feel deceived?
No, I didn't have really any feelings towards it at all. I was just kind of like, well, I'm still going to get presents.
Did you have a sneaking suspicion?
Yes. Probably. Yeah, that's why I went snooping around. I mean, to say the truth, like, why would I be sneaking around if I didn't have a suspicion
so
that...
you get to 8 or 9, and you're like, this fat man can't fit down our chimney. Something is off.
Yeah, in that same year, I think I found the same presents upstairs in the attic that came down from Santa. So it's just like...
Santa's storing his presents in our
why
attic.
is he storing? Yep.
Okay.
Things aren't adding up.
So Deal Daddy, what was your experience?
Man, for me, growing up, I think when I was young, so I was the oldest, but when I was younger, there was, like, they talked about Santa and just like, oh, the spirit of Christmas, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Santa, yeah, he brings presents just to keep it fun. It wasn't like more of a moral obligation. It was just like, y'all are children. You don't really understand this yet. You're 3, 4, or 5, whatever. Yeah, Santa, he's going to bring you some presents in the morning if you're good all year. But I remember being probably 5 or 6 and snooping and found something, or I found a present and then just realized it was mine. But I think I did catch my dad, like, putting the presents under the tree. I would stay awake. To listen. I heard somebody rustling around, crack the door, peek open. It was just my dad. But I didn't really think anything of it. I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. Main reason, we didn't have a chimney. So I was like,
how are you getting in?
Yeah, and because I think I vaguely remember asking them that, like, oh, he just kind of comes in the front door if you don't have the chimney. And I was like, that's
he has
not
a key.
right.
That's not right.
Even then, I was like, that's not right. And so I just never, I don't know, I never really remember believing in Santa. I remember hearing about Santa and just being like, nah, that ain't real. Just from a young age, I feel...
So you were never a believer?
No, never a believer. Like, oh, I would believe in it, like, okay, you know what, that's cool, that's fun. Like, that's fun to believe in, but that's not... Like, if my kids, I'm like, oh, yeah, Santa's cool, but those presents came from Daddy. He worked hard to get those
Deal
presents.
Daddy. That's why you're known as Deal Daddy.
Deal Daddy.
Deal Daddy Derek.
Santa's cool. He goes to every house except this one, and Daddy gets you those presents. Mommy and Daddy get those.
I have to say, I've had a hard time, reconciling that song, I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. Because if you really believe in Santa Claus, I don't think this episode of the Outlaw radio show is offensive. It's when that song comes on the radio. Like, what do you do?
Santa's an adulterer.
Yeah.
Well, is he, or is mommy's having an affair?
Mommy's a harlot. That's what
Mom's a whore. A Christmas whore with Santa.
Oh, that's the next Hallmark movie. The Christmas whore with Santa.
Oh, God.
Oh, good grief.
So, yeah, no, we never really, I don't think I ever really, for the younger siblings, like my brother and my sister, if my parents would try and do that I never spoiled it, though. Like, they ended up doing the same exact thing, snooping, finding presents, get them on Christmas morning. The tag said, oh, to Connor from Santa or to Derek from Santa. And we were like, yeah, no.
All right, so Justin, what you and I have similar backgrounds. So what was the whole, how did that play out in your home?
Pretty much the same way as you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost like word for word exactly as you. They pretty much told me right off the bat, when I had understanding, of course, like Santa isn't real.
Santa isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
So let me, because Creighton, the way that you kind of frame this is that, you know, we have a multitude of different perspectives, and part of you asking me is just as a parent, how do I approach it? I want to kind of handle it in two different ways. I want to jump right out there as a pastor, and then kind of as a parent, and then we're going to kind of backtrack our way into getting to the essence of your question.
Okay.
As a pastor, I don't take any positions about Santa Claus at all. You know, it's not one of those things where, you know, we're not one of those churches where we're kind of propping up the mythology. It's crazy to me that you've got a lot of churches in our area. I say churches loosely that have like, come get your picture with Santa Claus events. You know, you actually have Santa Claus tethered into the Christmas narrative, like within the church culture. And it's within the church culture, there's a whole lot, you know, about Santa Claus, where it's like, man, I think we're kind of missing something. We don't include Santa Claus at all at Calvary 316. It's not something, you know, for Christmas Eve, like our Christmas Eve service. We'll do a birthday party for Jesus. Old Saint Nick has no part of it. This is about Jesus' birth. He's the reason for the season. We keep the main thing. Now, that being said, there are a lot of Christians that are just really uberly pretentious about the topic. Whereas, you know, I've been studying, been teaching through the Sermon on the Mount. I've been studying chapter 7 of Matthew this week. And Jesus opens the chapter, "Judge not, lest you be judged." You know, with the same measure in which you judge, it'll be measured back to you. And it's like, you know, for me, this is not the hill I want to be judgmental on. You know, this is not the hill that, you know, as a church that I want to die on. There are a lot of more pressing issues in our culture that are controversial that we'll have to take a stand on and suffer blowback for. Santa Claus not being one of them. I think, you know, if there are parents, and we have parents in our church that, I mean, they go all out with Santa Claus, and that's fine. Hey, man, you know, I think that there's some freedom, some flexibility for each family to kind of make their own decisions. So as a pastor, I don't really approach the topic like some do that are very black and white, because you have those that are like, well, you're, and again, not to get ahead of ourselves, you're lying to your kid, you're a deceiver, this is sinful, you know, shame on you, to the point that like, you bring your kid to church, we're going to tell them the truth. I think that's a little overboard. It's a little overreactionary. And again, we navigate culture. And so, you know, is that really, do you want your church to be known as the anti-Saint Nick church? I'm not sure that's really exactly the biggin that you know you should stake your flag on. As a pastor, that's an approach. I'm very neutral. I don't really have an opinion. I don't talk about it. In private, if someone came up and was like, hey, you know, we're kind of like really struggling with this, what do you think? I would share my honest opinion, but I'm not.
If asked on a podcast.
or asked on a podcast, which is a different venue. It's not something I would talk about from the pulpit in this context. I will say, it's kind of a funny story. Years ago, I can't even really call it a sermon. It was more like an introduction to a sermon series through Christmas, where I was talking about like the reason for the season. And the whole first message was kind of about like, how do we navigate this whole Christmas thing, and you know, and I went through a whole bunch of stats of like how we've developed these traditions. Is Christmas really like, you know, a twisted Christianized version of a pagan holiday? Where were the origins of the Christmas tree? Where did we get Santa Claus? Which I can actually get to, the origins of Santa Claus, how we developed this tradition, which I think is a very interesting thing. And so I went through a whole bunch about Santa Claus. Well, I had a friend of mine who had never been to our church before. He came to church, and he brought his daughter, who was, I think, 7 at the time. And I was like, hey, man, you know, I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad you're at church. You know, we have a Sunday school class that I would really encourage you to take your daughter to, especially for this morning. He was like, no, I'd feel more comfortable if she stayed with me. And I was like, yeah, I'm really not sure this is the best one for. And he was like, nah, we'll be cool. I was like, all right. And so, like, I go into this whole thing about Santa Claus, and I can see him start squirming, because his 7-year-old daughter is like, wait, what? And at one point, he finally gets up, and he takes his daughter to the Sunday school class. And afterwards, I was apologetic. I really was like, hey, man, I told you this wasn't the Bible study. You know, I'm talking to adults who understand Santa Claus is not real. This is not a children appropriate. Which I'm glad you gave the disclaimer, again, for those that might be watching or listening around children. I don't think it's my right to parent other people's child. I mean, I guess that's my point from a pastoral standpoint. But even as a parent, like, my job is not to pastor or parent other people's children. They have to stand before God and give an account, and I'll leave that there. Judge not, lest you be judged. That being said, as a parent, our approach is very in line with how I grew up. And again, I'm going to preface this that I'm speaking from a personal conviction. So I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm not comfortable lying to my children about Santa Claus and his role within Christmas, and really Christmas morning. Maybe I'll take a step back. So our Christmas morning tradition is that, you know, we wake up. So there are no presents under the tree until late at night, and my wife puts them all out. And we do that because we don't want them walking up and, you know, shaking gifts and, you know, evaluating, well, I have more gifts than you, and what could this be? It's like we just remove all of that. Everything is in our back bedroom and in our closet. Kids know that if they go in there, it all gets sent back. Amazon's return policy is awesome. That being said, you know, kids go to sleep Christmas Eve. You know, in our Christmas Eve, we go to church. We have a bunch of friends over. It's very family, friends oriented. They go to sleep. Presents go out. They wake up in the morning, and they run down. They're looking at stuff. And we wake up. We have breakfast. We eat breakfast together. Then they're allowed to open their stockings. That's step one to the process. So we eat, and then there's stockings. And then they got to stop. My parents show up. My parents come over, and my dad will read the biblical narrative of what this is all about. We give gifts to one another because it's a response to the gifts that God has given us. It's grace-driven. The whole idea of giving to one another is a response of what God has given us and the fact that we have the ability to. Some years are lean, and thus there's less that's given. Some years there's plenty, and thus there's more that's given. And that's articulated in the ultimate gift, the greatest gift for God so loved the world that he gave, his only begotten Son. And that Jesus, and what, sure, Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. Cool. There's a lot of history to it, but this is the date that we have picked to celebrate this. That's fine. But that's what we do. And so we read through the Christmas story. And about, you know, Mary and Joseph and the angel and the shepherds, and we have the nativity scene, and the kids are acting out the story as my dad's reading it with the characters. And, you know, because we're biblically accurate, the wise men show up about 2 years later, so they're in the kitchen while the initial scene's happening. And I remember growing up, my mom had like this porcelain set of a nativity set that was porcelain, and Mary had like a cavity under her. And so it was always funny because we would cram baby Jesus up into the cavity. And so as we're kind of acting out the story, you know, we'd shake out baby Jesus and he's born, you know. We're very literal people, the Adamses. But we would have fun with, again, our Christmas was very Christ-centric. The gifts, there was a purpose in them. It was a response to God's grace. There was a moral lesson to it, a spiritual lesson to it. And then we took time. Like it was, it was always the conflict between my mom and dad, because my dad's family were, again, very Santa Claus, and when the gifts, everyone just tore into them, and it was like a whirlwind for like 10 minutes, and that was it. My mom's very methodical, and thus my wife is very methodical. It's one at a time. And thus we recognize with that person who gave it, what it was. There's an opportunity to say thanks, or to film a little video to send it to a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle. And so, it takes a little while. And then at that point, we get to the real meaning of the season, and we watch basketball the rest of the afternoon. So there is no, as far as our family goes, and our morning tradition, there's no looking for Santa Claus. That's just not a thing. Now, regarding Santa Claus with the children, we have never at any point told them that Santa Claus was real. That being said, we've taken more of the approach of, like, okay, so when people talk about Santa Claus, when parents who are real into it talk about Santa Claus, they make a connection that I don't agree with. Okay, and the connection is centered on the reality that a kid has to think something is real to fully enjoy the imagination behind it. And thus the whole angle is like, well, if my kid knows that Santa Claus is not real and Rudolph is not a thing, and this whole thing doesn't happen in the middle of the night to yield all of this, that if he knows or she knows it's not real, that, well, it lessens the enjoyment of the magic and the imagination of it. Well, I disagree, because, my kids really enjoy Ninjago, which is the animated Lego movie. They love it, to the fact that they act out the characters. They buy all the Lego sets. They build them. They enjoy it. They run around the yard with Nerf guns pretending to be these various things. We're into it. We watch all the movies, etc. I didn't have to convince my children that Ninjago was a real place, and Gormadon was an actual character. Like, I didn't have to prop up what is a very colorful and fun story under the pretense that it's actually real for them to enjoy it and for it to engage their imagination. My kids know that Peter Rabbit isn't real. There's not a rabbit that talks. But they love Peter Rabbit. Or my youngest, Mabel, is a Curious George fanatic. She loves Curious George. But at no point did I ever feel a compulsion that I had to tell her that there was an actual real monkey that lived in New York City with a guy in a yellow hat for her to, like, enjoy it and engage her imagination. So, like, I disagree with the pretense that it's an either or thing. I know people that don't, and I use the term lightly, like, they're not maintaining this facade of realism. They acknowledge what it is, and they just play to the imagination of their children. So they incorporate Santa Claus without propping up this idea that Santa Claus is a real individual. So for our family, it's like we treat Santa Claus like a cool story, like a fun story. We're not anti-Santa Claus, but Santa Claus is not real, and that's fine. Now, I'll tell you, that has been a very big challenge. Because, so Quincy in particular spent kindergarten, first grade and second grade in public school. And Theodore spent preschool in public school. And at our public school, when it comes to Christmas season or the holidays, man, Santa Claus is all over the place. Because, again, there's no mention of Jesus. There's no even the acknowledgement of the religious connotations of the reason for the season, which is our entire emphasis. And so it's Santa Claus, Santa Claus, Santa Claus, Santa Claus. And all of their secular friends and even Christian friends believe in Santa Claus. And so my kids felt very awkward in that secular setting, as in, like, well, I know the truth, and now I'm being asked to just kind of, like, also continue the lie? Like, that's not fair to me. My kids very much struggled with it, because we told them, like, hey, like just be chill about it. Like don't
ruin it for other kids.
I don't need 30 phone calls from people I don't know getting on to me I always joke that Quincy, like his first day of kindergarten, like he again has my personality, that he would stand up and say 2 things. 1, you're going to go to hell if you don't give your life to Jesus. And 2, Santa Claus ain't real. And then like we get kicked out of school and we go to private Christian education. So it has been a very difficult and kind of awkward thing. It's been since the pandemic, our kids have been in Christian school, and it has completely removed that kind of stress from just kind of the normal process. So that is, in a large sense, how we handle it. It's a fun story. We're not anti Old Saint Nick. It's a fun thing to goof off with, but we don't have presents under the tree from Santa Claus. Reason being is that we have presents under the tree from me, because it was my money that bought those things. And I'm not sharing credit with some fat guy that breaks into my house and steals cookies.
Amen.
I mean, I work hard for my money. And like, I'm not like, I want my kids' reaction to be, Dad and Mom, thank you so much for this, not thanking some
Santa.
imaginary fool.
I mean, if you need me to break into your house and eat cookies, I will gladly do that.
Well, Spike's daddy, I might take you up on that. So that's just kind of like speaking loosely about how we've approached Santa Claus. You know, I actually think and we'll get to your question, but like, do you know how Santa Claus kind of came to be? How the legend developed? Because a lot of people don't. And I think it adds an interesting wrinkle to the whole conversation. Are you aware, Creighton?
Like the German Old Saint Nick giving presents out to
Claus.
the poor and prostitutes and whatnot.
Okay, so I pulled up a section of the before-mentioned Bible study where I talked about Santa Claus. I just want to read very quickly a little bit of the history of Santa Claus.
This is one of my favorite histories of any character.
It's great, and I think it adds.
I like it. Does.
It's fun. It's fun. I actually read a book about Santa Claus and how it developed. So historically, Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, he was a Christian priest. He lived during the 4th century. Again, that was a long time ago. The legend states, again, the historical data, the research, church history, that Saint Nicholas, while a priest, was wealthy, and he was known in the community for his generosity. Nicholas, though, didn't like to be seen giving gifts. The Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus talks about, giving in secret so that your Father in heaven might see it, so you don't get the reward of men. So he's a priest, he's wealthy, and he's charitable. He's benevolent. And so, to keep his gifts anonymous, during the Christmas season, he would go around to some of the poor families in the area at night, late at night, and he would give the parents gifts for Christmas for the children, but he would do it so that his identity would remain a secret. The name Santa Claus is actually derived from the Dutch pronunciation of St. Nicholas, or Sinterklaas. That's where we get Santa Claus from. In 1804, the New York Historical Society was founded with St. Nicholas as its patron saint. As such, the members of the New York Historical Society, and again, this is early American history, adopted the Dutch practice of gift giving at Christmas. And so that's kind of the early introduction of some of these ideas to Americana. The next significant development would be Washington Irving. Washington Irving, in 1809, the legend of St. Nick gained life when he wrote a book called The History of New York. It was the first time that a picture of Santa Claus was introduced to society. It pictured Santa riding into town on a horse. 3 years after that, Irving revised his book to describe Nicholas riding over the trees in a wagon. In 1821, William Greeley printed a poem titled Santa Claus. In it, he describes St. Nick as being a man dressed in fur, who drove a sleigh drawn by a single reindeer. In 1822, Clement Moore wrote an account of a visit from St. Nicholas, in which Santa Claus was then portrayed as having a sleigh with 8 reindeer. The poem was later renamed. You want to take a guess? It's famous. Anybody?
A Night Before Christmas?
The Night Before Christmas. In 1939, and so, we're over 100 years later, copywriter Robert L. May wrote a poem about Rudolph, the 9th reindeer, titled The Most Famous Reindeer of All. In 1949, Johnny Marks penned the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The song was then recorded by Gene Autry, who I think is the greatest Christmas vocalist of all time. It became a bestseller. During the 1890s, the Salvation Army added life to the legends of St. Nick by sending men dressed as Santa Claus into the streets of America to collect donations during the Christmas season. By 1920, the image of Santa was standardized to portray a bearded, overweight man dressed in a red suit with white trim. In 1931, Santa hit mainstream when Haddon Sublime, who was an illustrator for Coca-Cola, decided to include Santa in their Christmas advertisements. So that's 1931. Over the last century and a half, Christmas has grown to the point where it has become an American institution. And Santa Claus has been at the center of the commercialization of Christmas. Again, I bring that up to say that, like, Santa Claus, it's weird to think about, but it is largely a modernized American tradition. Like, this is not something like that has like historical precedent. This is not something that we've been doing from generation to generation to generation. In fact, the truth is that Santa Claus really started to gain like popularity within like our grandparents' generation. So like the idea that like this is something that we always have done is not true. And it's not like some great Christian tradition. It's kind of completely secularized. Like it is. If it weren't for Coca-Cola, we probably would not be celebrating Santa Claus at all. And so just kind of an interesting development in the way St. Nick came to be. But the origins, a benevolent priest who wanted to give gifts anonymously, I mean, that's something that should be celebrated and talked about. Now, Justin, you have anything you want to add? Because you're kind of a historian on your own.
No, I mean, I think the history of him is interesting. The story that I heard, he didn't just give gifts because he's like 3rd or 4th century Turkey.
Yes.
He was a wealthy man, come from a wealthy family, and then became a Christian and a priest. And he took that when Jesus told the rich man to give away all his possessions.
Oh, the rich young ruler.
Yeah, he took that to heart. And so back then, and even in some cultures today, you have to give a dowry to be able to have your daughters wed off. So it's kind of the opposite of the way a lot of things are done here.
See, I think if you really wanted to incorporate Santa Claus, right? It's like, okay, and maybe I should have thought about this years ago. This would have been a good strategy. So you guys that don't have kids, here, this is how you can handle it. You can be like, listen, kids, Santa Claus is real. Or what was real? He's dead now, and he's with Jesus. But this guy, Santa Claus, was a wealthy guy, didn't know Jesus. And then he gave his life to Jesus and changed his heart and his life. And he wanted to be a conduit of blessing. And so he started giving away all of his stuff. Like you could build up the entire, like where your kids are at school and they're talking about Santa Claus. And he's like, yeah, he's a Christian hero. Did you know that? Jesus changed his life.
Right.
It's awesome.
And that's what I love about Santa. And yeah, he's not some jolly old fat man in the red suit that lives in the North Pole with a bunch of elves and the magic of Christmas. I kind of cringe every time I hear, oh, Christmas will be ruined if Santa can't deliver all the presents. But it's a good segue to transition to this, the history of him and who he was, and
there's a good lesson to it.
Yeah, and what Jesus did in his life is kind of the same story as all of us, you know.
Right. It's the heart of the gospel.
Right.
So Santa Claus. Now let's get to the landmines.
There are a couple.
So it's not Tim Allen?
So it's not.
I pretend all my presents come from
Wait
Tim
a
Allen.
second. I thought the Tool Man,
Tim the Tool
Tim
Man.
the Tool Man Taylor
Man
became
Taylor.
Santa Claus.
He taught. Who do you think taught the elves how to build? The
who
presents?
became Mike Baxter from Last Man Standing. So, you know what I think would be funny? Again, a good parenting tip is to like illustrate the ridiculousness of all of this. You should also, if you're going to go ahead and tell your kids Santa Claus is real, we should also go ahead and start telling our kids the movie Elf is real. You know, because that's our favorite Christmas movie. We love watching Elf as a family.
that's a
We
good
laugh, and our kids want to eat, spaghetti with
Maple
syrup
syrup.
on
Maple
top of it.
syrup.
So back to you had a 3-prong question. Go ahead and repeat it for the audience, Craig.
All right. So the first is, should Christians do or do not Santa? The second is Santa a moral issue? And the third is the biggest of the landmines, and that is telling your kids that Santa is real a lie? Is that a sin? Like,
Okay,
is lying to your kids about Santa a sin?
So the Bible's very clear that lying is a sin.
Right.
So if we're going to look at this and we're going to examine this from an honest biblical perspective, lying is a sin. We tell our kids not to tell stories that are not true. It doesn't mean it. It doesn't matter if they're well intent in the lie. A lie is still a lie. It's you have what's true and you have what's false. So, from the letter of the law, sure, it's a lie, and thus a lie is a sin. Are you going to go to hell because you tell your kid about Santa Claus? No. Is it a sin that Jesus died on the cross to pay for? Yeah. I mean, we sin every day. Just you can add this to the list of sins you've already been forgiven for. So, as far as like getting into the nitty gritty of it's a sin to, like, that comes across very, very awkward for me, which is why I wouldn't necessarily classify it. But again, if you're wanting to get to the letter of the law, sure. Yeah, a lie is a sin. And is it true? Well, no, it's not true. That doesn't matter if it's true. Well, no, if we're judging something between what's a lie, then yeah, it actually does matter if it's true or not. Even if you're well intent, or if there's an innocent purpose behind it, a lie is still a lie, and a lie is a sin. So that's the first component to it.
Can I say something really?
Yes, dive
real
in,
quick.
please.
That's going to go maybe a little deeper than that. So it struck me when you said, when you grew up, your dad reads the Christmas story to your kids, tells you what the Christmas story is about. So if you're a Christian struggling with this question, and you want to do that, or like you believe a Christmas story, you want your kids to know about the Christmas story, about how God gave his life to us free of grace, like just free of charge, grace forward, all grace. But yet you're going to make them believe in something that they either have to be good or bad to get something in return for, more or less. Like if you're bad, you get coal, you don't get anything. Or if you're good, you get more. That's not grace. You're not teaching the Christ. You're not
That's a
teaching.
very good
You're not
point.
teaching the
Right.
Christmas story. You're not teaching them what the meaning of Christmas is.
In fact, you're teaching them a perversion of the gospel.
Yes,
you're
you
teaching
are.
them an anti-gospel. You're teaching them something that's terrible.
You're teaching the better you are, the more you get.
In fact, you can
The
make
more you do.
You can make the argument that Santa Claus is the anti-Jesus,
Yeah.
They have a word for that.
the Antichrist.
There it is.
But I mean, where Jesus gives to us while we don't deserve it, and we can't earn it, but he gives because he loves us and he cares for us, and then it's in response to that we give to others, even if we don't feel like it, and our giving has a sacrifice to it. And that's a big thing that we do within our family is that our kids give gifts, and we want to teach them that there's a great, like the biblical principle, there's greater joy in giving than to receive. And then, but in contrast, like the entire idea of Santa Claus is that you've got this, he's a jolly old fat man, but anybody that's snooping on everyone, making a list and checking it twice to find out who's naughty and nice, can't be that joyful. And the reality is, like, how is anyone getting anything from Santa Claus?
Yeah.
Because our bad deeds far outweigh our good deeds. So it should be all coal. But then you're going to have a problem. That might be the easiest way to kill the tradition. because the climatologists are going to get all wigged out about now we're promoting coal. Santa's promoting coal and stockings. It should be like batteries, you know, charging stations. It can't be coal. What's he from, West Virginia? Coal. But the idea of like, hey, you get gifts based upon merit, reward, and the fallacy to that is that it doesn't actually play out that way. So you're even reinforcing an even worse idea because like, for example, you were a terrible child.
Oh, terrible.
How much coal did you get?
None.
So that's the thing. It's like, you knew you were terrible. And it's like, but Santa still gave me a bunch of stuff anyway. Like, he must be a really bad note taker. Or he's just unjust.
Or I'm not as terrible as I think I am.
My parents are terrible. That's why they don't get as much as I do at Christmas.
Right.
They have this backwards. No, it's a very interesting point. So it's like the story of Santa Claus actually reinforces a non-gospel. It's not good news. It's religiosity. It's the essence of legalism. This idea that God's blessings are completely based upon our merit, our earning, our deserving. Where again, if you get to the essence, the reason for the season, Jesus, the gospel, it's like, it was while we were still sinners that God sent his only begotten son, that Jesus gave his life so that we might be saved. Like, it's the greatest gift none of us deserve. So how then can't we in turn be generous and benevolent to one another? So getting back to, is lying a sin? Sure. To me, the ethical angle, I think Christians that, and again, this is one man's opinion, I think Christians miss an opportunity, and they convolute what could be a wonderful opportunity by going hard with Santa Claus. For all the reasons we talked about, what Nick just brought up, to me, I think it's an unforced error. Listen, as believers, we all have to navigate this idea of how do we live in the world, but not be of the world. Like, how do we navigate the tides of culture without being swept away? How do we live and relate without being compromised? Where, and this might be a better way to say it, as Christians, we should be looking for ways where we can be distinct. Now, those things should be obvious. They should be real. But I think Christmas provides a really stark opportunity for Christians to differentiate ourselves from the world. It's a holiday in which we're celebrating the birth of Christ and all of the spiritual principles that are related and connected to it. And yet we shove all that aside and we embrace this cultural thing of Santa Claus, this at best morality of legalism. It's a distraction from what is the light. Again, John opens, it's interesting, the Gospels. You only have one reference to Jesus' birth, and that is in the Gospel of Matthew. Luke's narrative picks up on the wise men. It's the pregame show with Zacharias and John the Baptist, Elizabeth, and then it segues. Yes, Mary's pregnant. We have her declaration, the Magnificent, her song, and then we get to the wise men. Mark, Jesus being a slave, doesn't mention it at all. John doesn't really talk about it either. Christmas, this idea of the celebration of Jesus' birth, you don't find it mandated in Scripture. You don't find the birth of Jesus pinpointed as being a significant holiday. It wasn't embraced by the early church. It wasn't celebrated by the early church. It was never talked about by the Apostle Paul. The only thing that we were to celebrate is the resurrection of Jesus. We do that Easter. It should be every Sunday. It's Resurrection Day. The church gathers on Sunday to celebrate Jesus' resurrection. But Christmas was not something like Jesus was like, I was born on this day, gather in my name. Paul doesn't talk about it. Every December, get together, and this is what, it's not there, which tells us from a biblical standpoint, it's not that big of a deal, but at the same time, it is a big deal in our culture. And it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. I feel the same way with Easter, maybe even more strongly than Easter, with Easter, about it being the resurrection. We don't do the Easter bunny or all that nonsense. This is about the resurrection of Jesus. So from an ethical standpoint, I think as a Christian, as a parent, as a Christian, I think you can absolutely have fun with the story of Santa Claus and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and you can read the stories, and you can watch the movies, and you can have fun with it. I'm not prohibiting that. But I think we it's an unforced error, again, to use that phrase, to overemphasize Santa Claus at the expense of what the season can really be and what can really be emphasized. It's why, you research like top 10 Christmas carols. They're all religious and theme. And yet we've allowed kind of this thing to get hijacked, again, by the commercial institution of capitalism. So, lying's a sin. If you make a big deal about Santa Claus, that's cool. I'm not judging you. Am I doing that? No. And do I think there's a better way? Sure. You can disagree with me, and that's cool. You got to have wrong opinions for mine to be right. So, that's fair game. Derek, you've been kind of quiet over there. I don't know if it's just the antlers on top of your head.
Yeah.
Any thoughts to all of this?
Obviously, my hat knows that Santa's real.
Your hat knows Santa's real.
No, I'm good. I agree fully. I don't really have anything to say about it. It's just like, he's not real, and it's up to you what you do with it. How you.
When you have children, what are you going to do?
No, that Santa's not real. Daddy bought those presents. Mommy bought those presents. We'll tell them, look, exactly how you did. This is something that they're not going to be able to avoid. If they're in public school, the majority of the kids that are around them are going to believe in Santa, and they're going to celebrate Christmas in that way. But I definitely want to keep them rooted and be like, no, this is what Christmas is, but this is what's going on around it, and this is why. So, but yeah, no, I'm never going to be like, Santa is there, but he's not who you think he is. He doesn't bring those presents to you.
Let me throw one more wrinkle here at the end. And I think this is a caution. Again, it would be very easy for all of this to come across sounding very legalistic, and that is not the intent. Again, obey your conscience. Judge not lest you be judged. This is not about judgment. It's about a question and sharing our thoughts on it. I will add one wrinkle. And it's a caution to the parents that do completely embrace and therefore kind of lie to their kids about Santa Claus. Inevitably, you need to understand the day will come where your kids realize you've been lying to them. Don't argue with me. That is a fact. The harder you go with the charade, the more devastating the disappointment. Kids are innocent. They do have incredible imaginations. It's what you're actually playing on. And at some point, here you, as their parent, as the most trusted people in their lives, you have been telling them something that you knew to be a deliberate falsehood. And you've been telling them it's real, and you've been going hard for years. And then at some point, whether it's a friend that drops the word, or whether it's like Nick, where you start connecting the dots and figuring it out on your own, or whether like your kid is a few fries short of a Happy Meal and you're like, oh my gosh, my 13-year-old still believes in Santa. I need to have a serious conversation because they look ridiculous at school. Whenever it happens, there will be a moment where your kid will have this thought: my mom and dad have been lying to me. That's how they'll interpret it. And that's just not me saying it. That's probably how you felt when you finally were enlightened. And if your kid at that moment takes one more step where they're like, well, wait a second. If my parent has been lying to me about Santa Claus, And whereas I've never seen him before, and I've been told to believe blindly in faith, if that was untrue and false and therefore devastating, what else have they've been telling me to believe that I can't see that might also be false? What other urban legend or myth have they've been stressing and teaching and pushing that might also be untrue? And if that kid or child thinks, well, what about Jesus? If Santa Claus is not real, and you've been telling me he's real, then how can I believe you that Jesus is real? Because you've been using all of the same logic to substantiate this story about Santa Claus to also substantiate this story about Jesus. So wait a second. How can I believe you about that? Now, you might think I'm overblowing it or that this is hyperbole, but I will say this, that is a logical conclusion. It's a logical question for your kid to ask. And for me, as a parent, I want my kids more than anything else in this world to trust that what I'm telling them about Jesus is true. And thus I have to make sure that what I tell them about everything is true. And that means that, like, there are some difficult realities that arise that are hard, right? That are hard. Having your kids ask you about, they saw riots in the streets, over the death of some guy they don't know about. And you're like, man, this is a very complicated topic for me to try to explain to a 7-year-old. But I'm not going to lie to you, and I've got to now try to frame this. Like, that's a little different than, like, actively pushing a falsehood. For me, I want my words to matter to my children, and thus I'm very careful with that. Now, again, you be led by the Lord, but I think you should think about things maybe a little bit more broadly, because, like I mentioned, I think you can have a lot of fun with the story without having to make it true. So, did that kind of help? I mean, I probably stepped on several landmines, and that's fine. But Creighton, you said you have a very hard position. So where are you, and has this helped maybe broaden your perspective?
Yeah, I actually grew up in a very similar situation that you did. Christmas morning we had we had a whole breakfast, and we did the Christmas story and then gifts, and then we didn't watch basketball because nobody in my family because of basketball. But we didn't do Santa at all. And I come at it from the same direction that you just finished with, where it's like, if my parents had told me that this thing was true for my entire life, I would have felt very betrayed. It's odd to me that other kids don't, apparently. Or at least if they do, they've hidden it from me, from the kids that I knew who believed it when we were growing up. But that was my hard line, is that I think that it is morally wrong because it is lying. Though you do make a good point in terms of judging. But I think it's morally wrong, and I just think it's foolish because you are setting your kids up to question the very thing that you're telling them. Like, if you're going to spend 9 years trying to teach your kids for 11 months out of the year that there's this guy in the sky named God who watches you every day, and then that 12th month of the year, instead of God watching you, there's Santa's watching you. He also has a big white beard, and he also judges the things you do.
And is God checking a list twice,
Right. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me that you would then expect them to take you at your word about Jesus, but, just move on with their life at 9 or 10 when they find out Santa's not real.
To me, you'll hear someone, and I heard it in my head as you were talking, the counter argument, like, bro, it's just innocent fun. It's just innocent fun. Okay. Then why do you have to tell them it's true for it to be innocent fun?
Right.
I
love Pokemon. I've loved Pokemon for a long time. I've known the entire time they're not real.
Right. Right. Incredibly, like, my kids also enjoyed Jungle Book.
Yeah.
And they were introduced to the cartoon of Jungle Book, Mowgli. And then, like, they came out with, like, this crazy movie where it's like an actual kid and a real bear. And at no point were my kids like, well, then this must be true. Like they even saw like the real version of it as being like, well, this is fanciful. And I love it. It's great. It's a blast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to believe that Rocky Balboa was a real person for me to enjoy Rocky 1, 2, 3, and 4. No one enjoyed the other ones.
I was gonna make a joke.
Like you don't have to believe something. My point. And I've always come back to this. Like you don't have to believe something is real to enjoy it. No. And I think the same thing is true with Santa Claus. Like we enjoy Thanksgiving. We know there were no pilgrims.
Right.
That's all myth. There were no Indians. And we all made that up.
And we have a good time.
That's a joke. That's a kid.
Yeah, I was waiting for where you were going with that one.
Yeah, you're gonna get some.
The 4th of July, we celebrate Independence Day. That didn't happen.
There's no America.
We're still a colony.
There are some conspiracy theories that we're
Oh no! This is
All right,
now we're
this is the
going.
time we go.
Spice Daddy.
Australia's not real.
Well, anyway, fellas, thank you so much for being on the Outlaw Radio Show. This is Merry Christmas, last episode. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We won't be back in the swing of things till the first Wednesday of the new year. So again, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. You guys be blessed.
Happy New Year.
We wish
Man,
you
that
a
was
Merry
the most
Christmas.
anemic.
I know, it was pretty terrible.
It was like a room full of
Scrooge
cratons
McDuck,
wishing.
I know you don't want anything for Christmas.
Of course
but,
I don't.
I'm not going to get you anything.
I appreciate
I will
it.
honor your request and keep my money.
I appreciate it.
But Scrooge, you enjoy yourself.
You as well, and all y'all, Merry Christmas.
Absolutely. Anything you guys want to add? We'll check out.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Spice Daddy.
Feliz Navidad.
Feliz Navidad. Well, you've been listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. The show is live streamed every Wednesday. Again, we're taking 2 weeks off. We'll be back at the beginning of the year. The audio is released of the live stream on our podcast. It's available on Apple, Google, Spotify. Quick links, visit outlawradio.org. If you are already a podcast listener, again, stress the live show. We stream on YouTube, outlawradio.live, as well as facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw. Again, my name is Zach Adams. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for being with us this year. 2021 has been an interesting year. Lots of ups, lots of downs. We've kind of rebranded the show and changed kind of the direction of what we're doing, and really feel like the Lord has been blessing it. So enjoy yourself. Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year. And look forward to you joining us again this time in 2 weeks for more of the Outlaw Radio.